So I'm recording. So anyway, so I'll introduce myself. My name is Jill. Weller is my maiden name, Jill Vampola. So I have been working at UCSD for I've just had my 25th year anniversary. And I started out in chemistry, and that was the first place I started working on training grants. And then when I came over to health sciences, I again started working on more training grants, and I've been in this position with the Research Service Corps for about 7.5 years. And this position kind of came about that there was just no major resources on the campus for training grants. And so even though I'm a health sciences employee, we service everybody on the campus. We don't discriminate between SIO and campus. And so I'm here to always be a resource for anyone. I wanted to just invite Holly to say hello from medicine. She's from the Department of Medicine, and Luna and Carol, and they also work on training grants. And the reason why I'm introducing them is because in health sciences, we do the majority of the book of business for training grants. So we work together a lot. So Holly, do you want to say hello? Or Carol?
Hi. Sure. I'm Holly Wright, and I have been with the Department of Medicine since spring of 2021, and with an exclusive focus of managing training grants as a fund manager. And obviously all of them are in the Department of Medicine. And we're working on establishing processes and SOPs in order to ensure that we create a way for training grants to be less painful. That's the goal.
I agree. Less painful is, that's one thing that I think that people will realize, that training grants can be very painful in the administration of them. So,
and fun.
Yeah, it's good learning. It's a great learning experience to have this under your belt. Carol, do you want to say hi?
Sure. Hi. Yes. Carol Finch. I'm an associate director in the Sponsored Projects Office, Department of Medicine. I've been doing research administration for probably about 20 years, about 3 years here at UCSD Department of Medicine. And I supervise the centralized training grant fund management desks run by Holly and Luna for Department of Medicine. And we recently centralized to try to like Holly mentioned, be able to get some consistency to the processes surrounding both pre and post award T32 and other training grant management, and to kind of learn from all those that have been doing it for many years here at UCSD, to be able to establish some best practices to help support the faculty and the trainees to make that process as smooth and pain-free as possible. So we look forward to learning from everybody who's had their hands in them in various capacities, and to also providing help and support whenever we can. So thanks, and happy to be here.
Luna, do you want to say hi?
Hi, everyone. I'm Luna. I've been working at UCSD with the Department of Medicine and SPO since actually last year. I think my 1 year hit like maybe a couple of days ago. So I work as the T32 manager with Holly in supporting the program coordinators with all the T32 regular stuff that happens with projects and RPPRs, FERs. So I am also in the process of learning as well, since I'm not as seasoned as Holly and Carol, but always learning every day.
I think that's one thing to remember with training grants. There's always something. Something's always changing, evolving, and there's new situations. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and get started with the PowerPoint. But first of all, I just wanted to apologize because for the since COVID, I have not done major training for the campus. And I think the hiatus with, I think the campus and all the ESR things changed, and there was like a lot of fires to put out for what it seems like forever, but that was like 3 years now. So I'm actually really excited to get back to training and getting, some, as like Holly, Holly was saying, that just like some taxonomy to get some consistency in the training grant processes at UCSD, kind of getting back to basics. So one thing I was looked up when I was thinking about training. I used to do training sessions, and I have all the training on the website, but so you can look back at prior trainings. But I used to do longer sessions, like 4 hours each, and then I think about it, like I was just overloading people with information, and I thought, well, this might be a better forum to do a little bit by little bit, just a little bite each week, and then maybe it'll just kind of stay with you better. Because I think as adults, we learn, we can retain things and recall things better if it's given to you in a little shorter snapshot. So but I want the format to be, I'll do some sort of training, and then we'll do, open-ended questions. If something can be addressed right away, I'll address it for the group, or if it needs to be taken offline and we need to do like a one-on-one Zoom call or special meeting or whatever. But I want to just let you know, and then I'll talk about later, but I'll let you know about the resources. As far as, there's 2 training grant websites on the campus, one that's a forward-facing website, and then the one that is password protected, that has more resources for the administrators. So anyway, so today's objective, again, like I said, is just a high level overview. I'm not going to get in the weeds too much, and it's very easy to do that. One thing that I want people to understand is there's a lot of differences between research grants and training grants. And the one reason why training grants can be so difficult to administer is because people administer them like a research grant. They think of it's the same policies, or it's the same, it's the same policies, and it's not. And so things can be quite different. And it's good to understand not just the philosophical differences between a research grant and a training grant, but just understanding what things like red flags, things to look out for. And again, like I said, knowing your resources is really important, and I'll go through the websites at the end of the presentation. So importance of training grants. I don't think this was really, when I first started working on these, no one really explained to me how important they are at UCSD, and actually any institution. But we, as a mission statement, and being an educational institution, it's extremely important to have good training and excellent, top-notch educational programs. And so these training grants provide that financial support for these programs on the campus, and they are considered, NIH especially, are considered very prestigious grants that kind of like showcase different training programs on the campus. So administrators may work with 1 or 2 grants, like Holly works with a bunch of different training programs in the Department of Medicine, from gastro to endocrinology. And then there's going to be someone like, say, Patsy, who works just with 1 training grant in her department. And so they all have different focuses. And so, but in essence, they all support the overall institution and the educational mission. So I thought I would be kind of sassy and ask, I don't know if you guys would do this AI thing in Google, like what's an NIH training grant? And actually it kind of came up with some pretty good information. But then I was being sassy, and it's like, why is it a training grant so difficult to administrate at UCSD or anywhere? And so it's interesting to see the AI answers, but I was hoping I could just type in, like, to AI, could you please fill out all my data tables? But it doesn't recognize what that means. So AI has a little bit of work to do on that. But basically this some of the information I got was pretty good. So it's basically providing funding for these programs, and it will help like give stipends and pay tuition and fees for students, undergraduates, postdocs, and pre-docs, PhD candidates. And there are some training grants that give to like early career faculty. And it's all usually in the health related research areas, biomedical research sciences. So one thing to understand is a research grant is given to an individual in an institution, like say Dr. Jane Smith, that funds a specific like hypothesis for scientific research, right? She has a hypothesis and she wants to get that grant funded so she can come up with the cure for, cancer. Training grants are different. They're used again to develop or enhance training. And I put pre and postdocs, but pre can, also include your undergraduates, which we have a couple undergraduates on the programs on the campus, and then postdocs, your early careers. So training grants are, again, to pay stipends to the trainees, and they are awarded to an institution. So like UCSD, Salk, LJI, we have the other Jill V on the call from San Diego State. So these grants are awarded to the institution. So if a PI leaves the institution, that's, Dr. Jane Smith has an X training grant, she cannot take that training grant to her new institution. She has to leave it here and another PI will have to come in and take over for her. Now that is different than a research grant, like, right? If a trainee leaves here and goes to say Yale, she can bring her research grants with her, but she can't take training grants with her because that's an institutional thing. These are institutional programs. So I think that kind of helps to understand the difference between the two. There are different types of training grants. The most popular type of training grant is what we call the NRSA training grant, which is the National Research Service Award. And these kind of go back about 50 years now. They started in 1974 at the NIH. Most institutes and centers support training grants. And they, like I was saying before, it supports research that benefits the public. The goal of NIH is to create these independent researchers from a diverse background, scientists from a diverse background that are going to go into research. That is one of the biggest outcomes that NIH wants, is they want to develop a whole nother generation of scientists. And so training grants supports that mission. And like I said earlier, it provides stipend support for your trainees. So Ruth Kirstein, you'll see that name and you'll be like, who is this person? But I think this is really fascinating, especially since the fact that she started at the NIH in 1955. And she was a key player in developing the polio vaccine, which I think is pretty amazing as a woman in that era. And she was the first female director at NIGMS, which is probably the most prestigious institute at NIH. And then she was also deputy director of NIH in 2002, 2003. And I also heard another tidbit about her. She's a concert pianist or something. So she's very talented, but you'll see this name quite a bit, the Ruth L. Kirstein. And I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that last name correctly. I'm hoping. The NRSA grants. That's going to be the majority of the topic today, is the NRSA grants, but there are other training grants, which I'll talk about as well. So the NRSA grants, or NRSA grants, are broken into two categories. First one is, like I was saying, the institutional training. So that is, we have different grants for pre and postdocs. T32s, I think, are probably the most common on campus. I think we have 40 something. I can't remember the exact amount of T32s we have on the campus at the moment. I'll have another slide on that. I think it's like 41. And then we have a couple T34, which is undergraduate. and then a T35, which is short term. So we have different types. And there's also a T90 mechanism or activity code, but we don't have any on the campus. So I didn't list it here. So as far as, again, we have the institutional training grants, but then we also have the individual fellowships that fall under that NRSA title. And those are broken down by what we call an F30, which would be an MD, PhD major, an F31, which would be for a pre-doc, F32 is a postdoc, and then the F33s are the senior fellows. So that's, I kind of like to organize it in your mind that the NRSAs are broken down into kind of these two major categories. So the interesting thing about this is a lot of the policies are the same, but yet they're not all the same, but a lot of them are. I know that sounds weird, but there are some differences with the individual fellowships versus the institutional training. Because the T32s are the most common on our campus, that is the focus of the website, and I'll go through the website at the end, but that is, since that is the most common, but that's not necessarily to say that that's, that's the end all be all. There's a lot of other training grants with a lot of other particulars, but again, I just wanted to kind of get you aware of the 50,000 foot picture here, like what is a training grant, and then how do you classify them? So I love this slide. I don't know, this to me, when I first saw this, I thought this was really helpful as far as, we have these excellent students that come here and looking at their career, academic career, where they would start and where would a NRSA grant be. So you can see here, a NRSA grant could be here when they're an undergraduate, and then maybe they would go on a T32, or as a postdoc, they could go on a T32 here. And then you could apply for individual fellowships, your F30s, or again, you could be on a T32. Again, this is where you're obtaining your doctoral degree. And then your K awards for NIH, which is all your career awards. So that would be kind of in this timeline, it would be after your individual fellowships. So the reason why I like to know this information is because as a fund manager or research administrator, if someone comes to you and says, I would like to submit a K award, right away, this is an early investigator, or someone that's early in their career. And that gives you several things to think about. First of all, they may not understand all of the internal processes at UCSD, right? Because this is maybe their first major grant they're submitting, or second, right? So that is very helpful. And trying to understand, do I need a PI exception? There's going to be different, rules along the way, right? Our policies at UCSD. So it's important, I find it, to know this timeline. Because when someone comes to you and say, oh, I want, I have an R37, or you just, you get a new PI and they have a portfolio and they have an R37 on in their portfolio, you're like, okay, this person's been around for a while. So this is why I find this very interesting. So again, coming back to here, you can see this is the early faculty positions. You have your K awards, the K99 or ROO, which I like to call the kangaroo grants. I don't know why. But that kind of is your launch into your research grants, which is your R series, right? R01s being most popular, and the R21s. Again, here's some more K grants. And then other grants, there's like P30s, P50s, U54s. There's so many different activity codes out there. But this is where, your PI has an independent, they have their own lab, they have a functioning lab with lots of postdocs and pre-docs and whatnot. So anyway, this is, I just, like I said, I like this slide. It's visual. I'm a very visual person, and I find it very helpful for people. So other activity codes, like I was saying, there's not just NRSA training grants on the campus. We have actually, I think, a NASA training grant. We have a couple NSF training grants. My specialty is NIH training grants. I know there's a CERN training grant out there. Somebody contacted me and I'm like, I have never administered one, so but I wasn't helpful at all for them. But there are other activity codes within NIH. We do have a T15 on the campus. We used to have a TL1 and ACTRI. I know someone here is on the call from ACTRI. In ACTRI, you now have the KL2, which they were linked at one time, and that was linked with the U54 grant over there. We don't have any TL4s. We used to have a D43. We had trainees with an institution in Mozambique, and so that was that training grant that has ended now. We don't have any T37s. Again, I mentioned the T90s. We have a lot of R25s. Now that kind of confuses people sometimes because they're like, but that's an R, that's not a T series, right? But those are considered research education projects. And a lot of times they have the same data tables or the same requirements as the T series. And NIH recognizes that this is potential for overlap with other training grants, and which I'll get into. And then we also have a lot of K-12s on the campus. I'm forgetting the exact numbers, but I have that on the future slide. Actually, this slide has that. Hey, I was right. We have 41 T32s on the campus. We have one T34, and which we just got. That was just awarded July 1. And then we have a couple T35s. One of that T15, 17 R25s on the campus. And so a lot of those will support just all sorts of different activities, training activities. And then we have a U2R, which is a fairly new mechanism on the campus. And that is, again, an international one that we are doing with Dr. Al-Dalami. And that one we're doing in the Middle East. And there's components that were awarded to the Middle East, and then there were components here. So we have trainees over there, but part of it is administered through us. And then, like I said, the K-12s, which there's a couple on there, and then the KL2, which is ACTRI. So the ACTRI one, that is an early career development. And again, that K series, so that one helps early faculty, helps fund early faculty. You see, we have 69 total training grants on the campus. No, this is just NIH. I should have prefaced this. This doesn't include the couple NSFs and the NASA one. The total dollar amount, not a huge dollar amount. It's only 28 million, which seems like a lot of money. But if you look at the big picture, I think UCSD in FY 2022 we had like $1.6 billion in research grants or extramural funding. And so 28 million is a very smidgen part of that. But one thing to know about training grants is they can be very difficult to administer on both submitting the application and once you get the award. So even though it's a smaller dollar amount, it's a smaller IDC amount, it can take up a lot of your time if you're a research administrator on your desk, more than say your average, R01. I like this slide because I'm comparing, not that we need to compare ourselves to other institutions, but we are number 9th in the nation, right behind some very prestigious other universities, as far as our ranking out of 300 institutions. So we're doing something right. I don't know, I haven't figured out what yet, but we are doing something right as an institution. And we're getting these grants and retaining them, even though we have our issues and our problems and whatnot. With the taxonomy, like the Holly was saying, efficiency, consistency, and there's always work to be done. But as far as I'm concerned, and as far as I've seen in the last 7 years, it's consistent. We are number 9th or 10th in the nation. So we haven't really gotten worse, but yet we haven't gotten so many new training grants. We get new training grants and then we lose a couple die off. So anyway, but so yeah, we're doing well in this area. So one other thing about the training grants is there's only 3 deadlines per year. Again, this is in general terms for the T32s, that T series. Now you may have a grant that's like, and I'm trying to think one that we worked on last year, and they might be off deadlines. They might be like November 7th, and I can't remember, or October 7th. I remember Holly and I did one. So there's different, you know who I'm thinking of, Holly, but there's different, an FOA, right? You're going to have different, or an R38, there's different, deadlines throughout the year, but these are the 3 major deadlines. And one thing to also consider when you have a training grant on your desk is, okay, when is that training grant ending? Because you're going to need to resubmit for the renewal, right? And you have to resubmit usually about a year in advance, so you don't have that gap. And you have to understand, like I have, National Institute of Aging, they only accept applications May 25th. Or NHLBI, they only accept renewal applications September 25th. So you have to really plan and look ahead as far as, you don't want to interrupt your program, right? You don't want to, and it would interrupt it, financially, right? So there's a lot of like little nuances to consider. One other thing to think about with the research grants versus training grants is budget. The budget is based on the stipend levels that come out every year. It's usually issued in January or February, and it's very specific. I can show you. Okay. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Sorry, like one of my screens just went black. So anyway, so this is what usually gets, it's a notice that comes out every year. The stipend levels, they're very specific, like, and then the tuition and fees and the institutional allowance. So these are governed by that notice. Okay, so now am I going to be able to get back to there? Okay, what do you know? Okay, and then the one other thing is there's data tables, and these you may have heard stories, and yes, they are all pretty much true, but data tables are required, and usually it always falls on the administrator to do these data tables. And they can be hundreds of pages long when you're submitting a renewal. And you also have to submit one of the tables at the progress report level. They could be a little bit of a PITA, what I like to call a PITA, which is a pain in the butt, pain in the ass. I hate to say it that way, but it's true. And so they could be tricky as far as the understanding of the what's the word? The interpretation of the I'm like losing my words, and the interpretation of the instructions. One PI might understand it this way, and another PI may say, "Oh no, I interpreted the instructions differently." So it can be very challenging to work on putting these tables together. And honestly, like these tables are something you really need to be, even if you're not putting in a renewal in for like 2 more years, you always have to be collecting the data for these tables. And so this is, again, we're just talking a high overview about what the data tables are today. And the reason why I say that is because I'm pretty much dedicating, I think, all of October just to data tables. And I'll have one session, we'll just totally go through 1 or 2 tables. I'll talk to you about organization of the tables, how to gather the data, where to gather the data. So it's not an easy task, but that's why I'm here. And people like Holly, we can help you, give you, direction. Poor Holly, she's like, oh my gosh, Jill, you're really. Exactly.
I accept your challenge.
So again, this is a high level data tables. These are what the data tables consist of. It's a lot of information. They want to know about all the departmental programs on the campus that are going to be involved with your particular training program. Say we have a neurosciences training program that we're submitting for a training grant, and they are going to be recruiting students from chemistry and biomedical sciences. And so they want all the statistics on that, like how many faculty are in each of those programs, how many graduate students are in each of those programs. They want to know, like, you know, the eligibility, how many of them are eligible to be on a training grant. I mean, the level of detail is pretty crazy. Data table 2, you'll list all your faculty there. So like a research grant, it just usually has, you know, a project, one PI, maybe if it's an MPI and you have 2 faculty or 3 faculty for an MPI. This is different, that you'll have your program director, and then you'll have what we call participating faculty. And these are the faculty members that are mentoring your trainees on your training grant. So I know about the average training grant has like 35 faculty on the training grant. Now, I've seen it as high as, I'm working on a training grant right now for the MSTP program, that's due in September. We have 167 faculty on that training grant. So that just, you know, that's this table times 167. So it's nice to make, if you have a smaller training grant, you only need, you know, 10 faculty, 15 faculty, 50 faculty. But yeah, it's obviously the more faculty you have, maybe the bigger program and the more data you're going to have to collect. Table 3, they want to see all the other training grants on the campus. So remember how I just went through that slide, and we have 69 other training grants. So they want to see, is the training grant that you're working on, how is that going to interface with the other training grants on the campus? So because we have so many training grants, this makes this table, you know, a bit larger. So if you came from a small institution like, you know, University of Delaware, they only have one other training grant on the campus, right? So it's, you know, it's a fairly easy table for them, but for us, it's a little bit more arduous. They want to see all the research support, basically your other support documents, if you've seen that, for all your faculty. So if you have 50 faculty, again, you're going to have, and they each have 5 grants each. That's, you can do the math on how much data you're going to have to put together. Training publications. They want to see how productive are your trainees, how the mentors are training them to be, you know, independent researchers. How productive are they? Table 6, which is the bane of my existence, that tracks, you know, if it's a pre-doc or postdoc, all your all their statistics. They want to know their GPAs, how many publications do they have, how many first author publications they have, where do they do their undergraduate institution. So there's just a ton of information that they ask for there. And then table 7, that's for renewals, like who was actually, if you're doing a renewal, like Ginsburg is doing a renewal, they're going to go where you had 5 slots for the last 5 years. How did you use them? What were the ethnicities of those trainees? And then the big one here is program outcomes. That is, they want to know the fruit of your program. They want to see, okay, when this pre-doc or postdoc goes out into the world, where are they going? Are they going into academia? Are they going into industry? Are they becoming clinicians? Are they getting their own grants? Do they have their own R01s? Are they independent researchers? So this is all the data. And the reason why I'm talking about a lot of this right now is because as administrators, it's going to fall on us to collect this data. And so I have one PI on the campus that she does her own data tables, and I think she's now officially retired. So, and that is an anomaly. Usually the project director doesn't want to have anything to do with these. But they want to make sure they're all correct, right? And that's always going to fall on us. So,
They want to make sure they tell the story they want to tell.
and that's exactly true, right? If they're writing a hypothesis on a research grant, they have full control over that. They know, right, that they do these, experiments in the lab, and that supports their hypothesis, right? So, that, I was just looking at the chat, and I have not followed up with it. I haven't read anything about the chat. I can't do two things at one time, guys. So I'll get to that.
You're
later.
fine. I will
Sorry.
answer.
I'm like, well, and like what my middle screen went out. So I'm like, okay. So anyway, training grant roles. I wanted to go over this because it's important to understand what the expectations are of the project director, your trainees, your faculty mentors, and then of course us, the administrators. So like I said, there's usually one or two program directors. There could be 3 or 4 or whatever, but normally it's 1 or 2. Then you have your faculty mentors, which could be between 10 and 150. And I'm not trying to scare you. 167 is very rare. What I'm working on right now, but usually the average is like in the 30s. And then your trainees. So it depends on the type of program. Like if you're working in the neurosciences training program, there might be 100 trainees on this particular program, but maybe only 15 of them are funded by the NIH. So it's kind of it's a broad term as far as trainees. And then the administration. So the administration is the research administrators, and then you have the coordinators, the people that are actually coordinating the program. And as far as research administrators, you have people that are doing the budget, the financial part of it, which again, that can get very difficult, challenging, I'll say. The program directors are always usually going to be someone in a full professorship. They're a very established investigator. You're not going to usually get a young early career project director normally, but not always. We have someone from the Shiley I. She submitted for a 235 and got it, and she's fairly new faculty. So I mean, I think she was a MPI with a full professor. So generally speaking, it's going to be a full professor that is the program director on here. Usually they want to see program directors that have a strong research background. Usually they are expected to have an R01 or an R01 equivalent. This is the person that's accountable. Basically, their name is going to be on the grant, so they're going to be accountable and responsible for the project. And then usually the NIH will say there's like 10% effort to be, working on the grant. It's usually more than that. And usually they don't get paid by the NIH. There are instances where the campus or your division or will help defray costs. That's something that you would negotiate ahead of time. And then remember I talked about the participating faculty, which is data table 2. So some people call them preceptors. You'll see that name. It's a mentor, it's trainers. Every pre-doc or postdoc has a mentor. And so those are the ones that are going to be listed in this particular category. We have, I think it's a higher number than this now, but we have over 1,000 faculty members at UCSD that are participating in training grants. You may have a more, what's the word, solidified PI that he could be on 10 training grants, listed as a mentor on training grants. And then you have some where they're just listed on 1 or 2 training grants, depending on the program, right? So a lot of them have multiple, multiple grants. So this, as an administration level and as a research administrator, that means, the more of these training grants we're submitting, the more requests you're going to get for information. And so that's where it could, people, you're gonna get this email going, I need, information from data table 5 or whatever from your PI or table 4. And so that's why it's good to understand, okay, what are they actually asking of me? And it's a common request. Again, they have to be strong researchers usually. We have a lot of training programs that are bringing on like well-established, high-ranking professors, and then they bring on the junior faculty, and they have like a dual. The trainees have 2 mentors. They have a junior faculty and a higher-ranking faculty. So it kind of just depends. And they do a lot of the working directly with the trainees on their goals, on their science and whatnot. Trainees, again, that could be an undergraduate, and it can be a pre-doc, a PhD candidate, or a postdoc. So when I say I have to be very specific of PhD candidates, because master students are not usually, I've never seen it on a training grant. It's always, when they say pre-doc, it's a pre-doctoral. It's not. Some people interchange terminology and they'll say graduate student. That is not technically the same as a pre-doc. Graduate student could be also a master's student. So, I mean, people have different terminology. So I want to be very specific that the funds are used for PhD candidates, and then postdocs. So postdoc could be a 2-pronged thing. They could be a postdoc researcher, or they could be a postdoc that has a post MD, not a post PhD per se. They're doing a clinical residency, say in surgery, and they did 2 years of clinical residency, and they're going to take off a year, maybe their 3rd year, to do a fellowship in research. And so that's why I put in their postdocs and clinical residency. So there's different types of postdocs there, especially when you're on the medicine side. You're going to see there's a lot more clinical residents going on the training grants. So tying this back to the data tables, you have to go back for 15 years. And so it's constantly on the administrator's desk to be tracking these trainees for the last 15 years. And then one thing to remember here is only citizens and permanent residents are eligible to be on a training grant. This is just a quick snapshot of the current slots we have on the campus. You'll see, there's 82 undergraduate slots right now, 44 short-term summer slots, and then we have 187 pre-docs right now and 144 postdocs that are being funded, basically with that $28 million you saw. So I like to put this on here now. Honestly, every department I've seen is different. And this is one of the things that's difficult at UCSD. We're so fragmented and we're so large that I've seen it where, a fund manager or a research administrator, the lines blur on whose job it is sometimes. So this is, like I said, I'd like to say typical. A typical administrator or coordinator role, they're going to be involved with advertising that training grant, recruiting for new trainees, maybe, going over all the applicants you've received. They're going to be involved with X-Train, which is something I'm going to be training on in a couple of weeks. That's how you go in and appoint these trainees to the grant or terminate them. Tracking the trainees, which I've alluded to a lot here, is, keeping up with the applicant data, because you need all that data for the renewal. And updating extract, which again, I'll get into, and that is taking all the data you've collected and putting it into the NIH ERA Commons. The coordinators are going to be putting in for, travel expenses. They're going to be working on the progress reports, seminars, retreats, surveys, all that kind of stuff. And then, like I said, a typical research administration role would be your financial management, which, that could be, when I go in and, in the future, when we train on that, I'm going to do like one topic a week, because financial management is very complex, and it can be difficult to understand. So that is a big umbrella there. You're gonna have to, you know, as far as a research administrator, you're gonna have to reconcile the terminations in X-Train. And what I mean by that is if a person is appointed for a year, and then we told the NIH, hey, they were paid $50,000. As a research administration role, you're gonna have to go in, make sure look at the ledgers and say, were they actually paid this amount? And you're gonna get involved with the progress report, a lot of, like I said, a lot of budgetary stuff, and then monitoring expenses, of course, and doing some projections and transfers and stuff. Overall, administrators are a key to these grants. They're very underappreciated, but I appreciate them. But it can be very difficult when you have a training grant on your desk. I'm not trying to scare you, but I think I am, but it's one grant out of, like, you know, however many grants you have, and it just takes up so much of your time. So some training grants, you can put a portion of the salary on that training grant. However, then that reduces the training related expenses. So these are all future things I'm going to talk about. So I wanted to go over the website. Can you guys see my screen still? Everyone can see the website now?
Yep.
Yep. Okay, cool. Okay. So this is what we call the Pulse website. This is something that I maintain, but there's also training grants at ucsd.edu. This is a forward-facing website. This has the list of all of our current training grants, and this includes all of our NASA grants and the NSF grants. The Pulse site is strictly just for NIH training grants, which is what I maintain. And GEPA, the Graduate Education Office, I forgot the rest of the acronym, I like to call them Grad Division, they sponsored this website. And so there's one thing that I know Jen is on the call right now, but I work with the Central Campus, Tamara Schwab's the Assistant Dean for GEPA, and Jen, and we help coordinate meetings for the campus, institutional letters for the campus, something that's paramount for your application. And so there's a lot of different information in here and program resources. If you want to hear about faculty mentoring, or you might need, like, you know, an excerpt, a blurb for your grant on, you know, something on diversity inclusion. You know, it depends on what the topic is. So we try to offer resources there. So that is, like I said, our forward-facing website. As far as the non-forward-facing website is the Pulse site. Now this site is accessed, and I have it on my signature card, and I can put it in the chat. So if you're not familiar with this, you'll have to log in with your AD credentials. So however you log into your desktop, is how you would log into the website. And everybody already has access. I don't have to provision you access for it. But there are certain things that are proprietary, I guess you can say, that are on this website that are, that's what's behind the firewall. So just to go through the website, and one of the things that, and the time is ticking, we're at 12:52. There's a lot to understand about training grants. And I know people will walk away today and they will remember maybe 50% of what I've said today. And then it'll, like, by tomorrow, it'll be 25%. I don't know. I know the statistics, but the one thing you can remember, and the one thing you can walk away with, is there are a lot of resources on the campus. I just showed you the training grant website, and then we have this website. You can always email me. But that is the main thing to remember today, is you're not alone in this process. So this is a website that we put together in the Research Service Corps. Again, this is kind of what I did today. The training grant overview went through all the different training grants that we have on the campus. you can see a list of, okay, I want to know more about this training grant, and then this would be your PI to contact. They have 25 slots. Just, there's a lot of different information on here. There's pre-award information on here, so you can learn about how do I get started? I'm working on a renewal. My PI just told me I need to start planning for a renewal. Okay, then I put in all the steps that you need to work on. I have a lot of checklists. I love a good checklist. I love a good Excel spreadsheet. So I've put a lot of things together on how, how do you get yourself organized? Because I think that's one of the biggest things, and it can be really daunting as an admin. It's like, how do I organize myself? So there's budgetary information. So if you're a research administrator, someone comes to you and says, I'm putting in a training grant. There's a coordinator doing all those data tables. I don't have to worry about that, but they asked me to do a budget, and it's not the same as a research budget. So how do I do that? You can come to the website. I have a budget template for you. You're just doing an RPPR. Great. I have a template for you for that. And there's, talks about all different, things on here. Have some tips and tricks at the bottom there. And then post-award, which this could be, I think, more fleshed out with the legacy system. I had a lot more information on here. But this is something that I want to do a lot of training in the next couple months on just post-award, and because it can be so complex, but trying to understand that in the big picture, like say if you have to do a FER, a financial expense report, you're coming to the end of your grant year. How do I do that? This is where you could go and find out information on how to do that. Say you're going to do an RPPR. Your PI goes, hey, we have an RPPR due September 1st. Can you help me with it? You could go here. There's an RPPR checklist, and can help you get yourself organized. How am I going to attack this assignment? That went to the wrong screen, but I think you kind of get the idea of the types of resources that are on here. I have some institutional data on here, like overlap in faculty, the list of the faculty members on every training grant on the campus. And then I also have a resources tab, and I'll have this recording on here and the slides up here. Budget templates, prior training, all sorts of stuff like that. ORCID training, we've done BioSketch training. There's a lot of different things on here. Of course, FAQs and whatnot, but I just wanted to kind of give you an overall, view of the website. I'm gonna stop sharing. Sorry, okay. And so we're coming up to the end of the hour. It's 12:57, but I wanted to open it up for questions, and I can try to answer some of the chat, but if you want to just unmute yourself and ask a question, if I can answer it right now, great. If not, we can take it offline, but go ahead and don't be shy.
Hi, do you have any resources for the extract?
I do. So
Okay.
I can either meet with you and walk you through that, but I have I've done a whole class on that, so I have prior slides on that. But yeah, I can walk you through that. Absolutely.
They have, in the last 4 months, NIH has actually finally updated their training on, or their available instructions on using the new version of XTrain as well.
Okay, is that on the website? Do you know?
Yeah, that's all on the website. Yeah, and actually, there's NIH has really good, instructions like how to do a termination, or how do I appoint someone. So I mean, that's something I can always, if you wanted to meet, we can always meet, and I can walk you through the first, that first one. So it's a little bit easier.
Got it. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Jill, could you show me how to locate the RSC web page? Because
Oh, sure.
I'm in pause, but I couldn't find your page.
So I'm having a little bit of an issue because I lost my one screen and I can't find. There we go. Okay, it's. Oop, I just sent it. I haven't. Hold on one second.
I just shared a link, Maria, to the extract page in area comments.
Thank you.
There's the website and it will ask you to log in. Yeah, so I will be posting the slides on the website and the recording of this. Oh, okay, so Holly, you answered some questions. Thank you. Appreciate it.
No problem.
So next week it's 1 o'clock, so I don't want to take too much more of your time, your lunch period, but I'm going to be talking about policies. So like trainee policy, stipend policies, all that kind of good stuff. So can I get a little bit more in the weeds of things?
Cool.
So that's all I got. I know, very exciting. Holly, were you
Thank you, Jill.
My pleasure. I hope you guys come back. I do have a poll if you guys want to answer my poll. You don't have to, but and again, if you have topics that you want addressed, so like I'm going to do RPPRs next January because a lot of them are due March 1st. So, we could meet offline about something like that, or if it's going to benefit the whole group, of course I can present on it. But I was trying to do things like appropriate, like do data tables for people that are gearing up for the May 25 deadline, do those in October, stuff like that. So anyway, I hope to see you guys next week, and I'll stay on the line for a little while in case anybody has one-on-one questions.
See ya.
Okay, bye. Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks for hosting this.
Oh, you're welcome, Kylie. It's nice to meet you.
Yeah, it's nice to meet you.
I had some like I don't know, my computer, like all of a sudden I have 3 monitors, and the middle monitor where my camera is just turned off, and so I'm like
Yeah, that's happened to me before too.
so anyway,
But yeah, I'll definitely be back. So thank you so
cool.
much.
Nice to finally meet you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jill.
My pleasure. Have a good week, Olga.
You too. Have a great week and
You too.
almost there.
I know, almost there. That's right.
Bye.
Bye.